Satipatthana, establishing awareness and cultivating the path. This is the united path for overcoming sorrow and lamentation, for vanquishing pain and distress, for attaining the way, for realizing nirvana. Namely, the 4 ways of establishing sati. A person abides observing the body in the body with ardency, clear knowing, and sati, having put away greed and distress for the world. So I've intentionally left it as sati because in this slideshow, the idea was to look into what does sati actually mean in the suttas. And I make the distinction that you read about in the study guides between mindfulness and mindfulness practice. So here, mindfulness practice involves things like ardency, clear knowing, and sati. And it involves doing so in regards to 4 areas: body, feeling tones, mind states, and dharmas. Bodies in bigger letters at the foundation because it's so important for this tradition. It's like the foundation, it's the root, it's the basis where the others can grow. And it's kind of going from what's coarsest to what's most refined or subtle and what's most kind of difficult to see. Body is relatively easy to kind of tune into, and feeling tones are not a little bit maybe more difficult, but pleasure and pain. Mind states are harder, and more deeply, the operating principles underneath the mind states, they are the most subtle to really get your hands on. And the word magga, path, is used at the opening of the text. This is the united path, united converging path. This is the direct path. And there's a way of reading this text that it clearly lays out, it's a text which implies movement, motion, and moving along a path, the development of growth, of change over time. So we're on a path of body, feeling tones, mind states, and dharmas. It's one way of understanding this text is that each of these can stand alone as a complete path in itself, or you can do all 4 of them, and they combined to create a path of practice. So what is sati? In Pali, sati is a feminine word. It's a gendered language. Some of the Western English translations for sati over the decades has been mindfulness, probably the most common one, attention, awareness, self-recollection, recollecting mindfulness with reflective awareness, and retention. And that retention comes from the idea that sometimes sati is related to memory, what you hold in mind. And if you look at the verbs that sati is used with, the verbs, what you do with it, we have the verbs like one enters into sati, entering into the woods. One abides in sati, like floating like a big whale in a massive ocean. So sati, we find out, is not something one does. It's not an action one purposefully does and engages in. Sati is a state in which one enters and abides. And sati is sometimes referred to as a samadhi. The 4 foundations of mindfulness, sometimes called a samadhi. And samadhi is also a state that we enter into. Usually people think of it as a state of concentration, but there's a variety of states. And so that we, in jhanas, for example, something we enter and abide in. And we see that with the jhanas discussion, where sati is used in the description. It's present in the third jhana. With the fading away of rapture, a person abides in equanimity with sati and clear knowing, feeling pleasure with the body. One enters and abides in the third jhana, of which the noble ones announce, with equanimity and sati, one, one, has, one has a pleasant abiding. And in the fourth jhana, one enters and abides in the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure, and has the purity of sati due to equanimity. Another verb used with sati is to cultivate. A farmer doesn't doesn't engineer the growth of the plants. A farmer plants it and tends to the plants, cultivates it. They don't go out in the fields and pull the plants to make them grow faster. You rather protect them, feed them, water them, and allow them to grow. You cultivate them. So sati is not something we do and engineer, but it is something we tend and cultivate, nourish. It's also something that is established. Sati is established. When we sit down to meditate, the idea is to establish sati. So mindfulness practice is a set of practices used to establish and strengthen sati. So there's a difference between being and doing. And so some people really like this distinction and emphasize the importance of practicing being rather than a neurotic pursuit of doing. Sati is not something we do, it is more like something we are. Sati is not itself an intentional activity, it is a state of being. So my proposal is to translate sati as being aware, or sati as awareness. But what kind of awareness? And one answer is lucid awareness. And no more important person for translating these texts into English has been Bhikkhu Bodhi, who's the translator of our texts. And in a commentary where he writes about mindfulness, in this essay he writes, he wants to translate sati as a lucid awareness. So the fact that I would like to use awareness has this dramatic support from Bhikkhu Bodhi, who likes the word lucid awareness. Oh, there, Bhikkhu Bodhi, right. Sati as a form of awareness, perhaps clear awareness is one possibility to translate sati, that turns into lucid awareness, pati sati. In the refrain, there's this expression pati sati. It actually has two S's in the Pali. And it has this prefix, pati, which is a reflexive prefix that suggests that's the one that is so clear that it stands out and you know it. And so I'd prefer to translate pati sati as lucid awareness and simple sati as clear awareness. And the Satipatthana refrain, which is so important, clear awareness that there is a body is established to the extent necessary for knowledge and lucid awareness, pati sati. And one abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. This is how a person abides, observing the body as a body. So one abides in awareness, kind of like when the practice is going really strong, it's a little bit like you're being carried along. It isn't just abiding in a stationary, static way. It's almost like abiding in a current, which is carrying you along. And this idea that the practice leads to it being carried by a current is represented by the fact that the word stream enter in Sotapanna, the Pali word that's translated as stream, literally means current. And so when we've entered the current of the river, then we're carried along. And so to become a stream enter is to enter the current of the Dharma. And sometimes we just sit back, see the paddle is at rest. The person's not even paddling, we're just getting carried along. So sometimes we're lucky and it can be that way. And then sometimes we have to paddle. And they're still being carried along, but you got to paddle to kind of stay on course and stay with it all. And sometimes just mindfulness practice is a lot of work. So mindfulness practice, the paddling that we do, the doing, that's described in the Satipatthana Sutta, in this text for today, there are 6 kind of doing practices, more active practices that are presented. And here they're listed: to observe, to know, to experience, to calm, to review, and to understand. And then the being practices that appear in the same text is awareness, is sati. And the way we paddle is to paddle until we float. We do until we can kind of enter and abide in this strong state of awareness. And how does a practitioner abide observing the body in the body? Ida. Sometimes this is my favorite word in the text, ida. And some people maybe are a little being too silly, but you know, all self-respecting religions have something powerful and meaningful that ends with ah, like Allah and Krishna and Rama and I don't know, and Abba, they have it sometimes. And there's probably, I can go on, Jehovah. And we Buddhists, we have Ida. Isn't that great? That's as important. But what Ida means, it just means here. The instruction Satipatthana begins with here. And I think this here is such a powerful word that we don't want to overlook or read quickly and gloss over. Here, Ida. Here, having gone to the wilderness, a foot of a tree, to an empty building, the person sits down with legs crossed and body erect. Having established awareness to the forefront. Always attentive when breathes in with awareness and breathes out with awareness. Breathing in long, one knows I am breathing in long. Breathing out long, one knows I'm breathing out long. Breathing in short, one knows I'm breathing in short. Breathing out short, one knows I'm breathing out short. When trains oneself, breathing in, I experience the whole body. Breathing out, I experience the whole body. And when you're experiencing the whole body, the path we're on shows a fork. Because when you really feel your body, the whole body, you feel where the body is tense, and you see the possibility of releasing that tension and moving towards tranquility, a tranquil body. And this is such an important insight, such an important point in the practice that we shouldn't overlook the tremendous importance of finding the path for yourself and using these 2 criteria for knowing which direction to go. You don't want to go in directions that continue the tension, add to the tension. You want in some kind of way, go the path where there's a calm alertness, alert calmness. And that's the next instruction, kind of. Once we can see the whole body, one trains oneself breathing in, I calm the bodily formations. Breathing out, I calm the bodily formations. For many years, especially when I was a Zen student, I ignored or didn't notice that there were things the text said we could do. I was really into this school of practice. We just know what's there. Just be mindful and don't do anything else. And like you weren't allowed to do anything else, but just be mindful, just be aware. And then it kind of surprised me one day when I read the text more carefully again and saw that, oh, you are allowed to calm yourself. You are allowed to relax. It was kind of a radical idea for a Zen student. At least the kind of Zen student I was. So in the first foundation of mindfulness, observing the body, There's 6 exercises. That one is centered in the breathing, one is mindfulness of postures, another mindfulness of activities. And these are, since all these have to do with movement, the suggestion is that these are physical, moving experiences. We can, animated experiences of the body of movement. So they're relatively coarse, relatively easy to see and know what we're doing. Then the last 3, body parts, elements, and corpse, are using the more the mind's ability to imagine, mind's ability to think up or review or reflect on things. And so the body parts are, reviewing, reflecting on, imagining, visualizing some aspect of the 31 parts of the body. The elements too are kind of, depends how we understand the elements, but they're also more subtle things to become aware of. And the corpse is clearly a visualization practice. So we're going here from what can be seen externally, you can see externally someone breathing, the posture and their activities, to things that become more internal, until something that is the corpse you can see from the outside. But the exercise itself is not to go to the charnel grounds and look at a corpse. The exercise is to, in meditation, to visualize the corpse. So this is a private, imaginary kind of world we're entering into, somehow to develop this strong awareness. These are the body parts, the corpse. And then there's observation of feeling tones, pleasant, painful, and neutral. But those feeling tones are divided into 2 categories. There's sa-amisa, the feeling tones not connected to the path, and nira-misa, those who are connected to the path of liberation. Very different kinds of feeling tones. And here we find a very important transition in the text. I think of where the text goes from sa-amisa to nira-misa, I see it as being the pivot of the whole Satipatthana. And it's the pivot or the transition from things that are more focused on the body and to more focusing now on the mind. And then when you get to the state of mind, the third foundation of mindfulness, here also there's a simple division, a fork in the road between states of mind which can be called bondage and those that have to do with freedom. And so observation of mind states. I was a little bit saying that there's attached mind states and unattached mind states. Contracted mind states and expansive mind states. So, there is this distinction, this division in there. We start seeing these different mind states and seeing the quality of them, and that which has much more connected to a path of liberation, the spiritual path, expanded mind states, concentrated mind states. And that leads us to then look more deeply into the operating activities of the mind activities, the processes of the mind. And this is the fourth foundation, observation of dharmas, seeing the mental processes that either keep us caught or set us free. So here again, we're seeing a division, a fork in the path in a sense. If you can see the difference between those that keep us caught and those that lead to freedom. And the hindrances are the preeminent example of those which lead us to suffering, to bondage. The noble truths and the factors of awakening are what leads to freedom. So there's this path, body, feeling tones, mind states, and dharmas. And together, somehow, these make the united path for attaining the way, for realizing nirvana. And there we go. Sati can be a feminine noun.